Thank you everyone for joining today's joint webinar. My name's Amy Cretton and I'm a strategic HR partner at Moore Kingston Smith, our HR consultancy part of the business. I'm joined by Ben Farrow, who's the director at Pure Resourcing. We know that it's currently very difficult to recruit, so we wanted to share some insights with you as to how to attract the right people for the right roles, and we wanted to talk to you a bit about how to retain those people when they join and help optimise their chance of success in the role as well. If anyone's got any questions throughout, if I can ask you to put it in the Q&A function, because it helps me keep track of the questions rather than in the chat box. And if I can weave those in throughout the discussion, I will do. Otherwise, there will be time at the end for any questions that remain unanswered. But for now, I'll pass over to Ben, who will start you off on recruitment.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Hopefully that's working for everybody. So good afternoon, and thank you for joining Amy and me for our webinar on recruiting in a competitive marketplace. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ben Farrow. I'm a director at Pure. You may well be thinking, who are Pure and what do I know about attracting talent and recruitment processes? Well, by way of an introduction, I've got 18 years experience working in specialist recruitment across Essex and East Anglia, 10 of which have been with Pure. I've worked with organisations of all shapes and sizes, from SMEs to multinational corporates and everything in between, advising and supporting them with their recruitment and their talent acquisition. So whether that's recruiting for one key role right the way through to managing campaigns for multiple hires or new sites. Pure are the leading professional recruitment consultancy for Essex and East Anglia, and we specialise in accountancy, human resources, technology, marketing and professional office recruitment. So before I begin, just a quick, well, I haven't got a magic wand or all of the answers, but I'm going to talk you through kind of a few things around the current market, recruitment trends, and just some key practical steps that you can take to make sure that your recruitment process is fit for purpose in the current market. I'm going to talk you through the current market, recruitment trends, candidate experience and what that means, job description and advert. These are different things. The interview process, selling your opportunity, the offer, and briefly onboarding as well. So, which that slide would have been really helpful for, but there you go. So the current market, I'm sure most of you as HR professionals, people managers, business leaders, business owners, and just people who watch and read the news, it will come as no great surprise that it is a candidate short market at the moment. The combined effects of COVID and Brexit have created a huge candidate shortage across virtually all sectors at a time where candidate demand is at an all-time high. The BBC recently reported that UK job vacancies are at a record high. The ONS stated that there was over 1 million vacancies registered in the 3 months from July through to September. And at the beginning of September, the Recruitment Employment Confederation and KPMG did a joint report on labour and skills shortages. 9 in 10 businesses that they surveyed said that labour shortages are their biggest concern for the remainder of 2021, and skills shortages were a major concern for 65% of those businesses. The other key findings by KPMG were that there has been the sharpest increase in permanent recruitment placements on record. The growth of demand for staff remains close to an all-time high. The availability of workers has fallen at an unprecedented rate, and this has led to a sharper increase in starting pay. Okay, so we know it's difficult out there and good candidates have got more choice than ever, but what trends are we seeing and what changes do we need to put in place? So just looking briefly at some of the recruitment trends that came about as a result of COVID-19, I think March, April, May last year, we saw a lot of people move towards virtual interviewing. This was a necessity at the time, but we are seeing with a lot of our clients, this is something that's continuing, whether that being the sole process or part of the recruitment process. The benefits of virtual interviewing, it's convenient, it's quicker, lower costs, and it saves time. We're finding that a lot of our clients at the moment are, like I say, using it for a first round and then potentially having a final round in the office. But it's also much easier in terms of managing diaries of both the hiring manager and the potential candidates, and can really help with the speed side of things. The other big trend is around hybrid and flexible working. 75% of workers were back in the office in some capacity in September. Flipping that on its head, that means that 25% of workers are still working fully remotely at present. So we're yet to see kind of a long-term impact, but surveys and our own experience show an overwhelming preference of employees and candidates to be offered hybrid or flexible working. Not only is this a really good candidate attraction tool, but it really opens up the pool of candidates that might want to work for your organization. People are prepared to travel further if they're only going into an office 2 or 3 days a week rather than the traditional 5. Secondly, and we're seeing this an awful lot at the moment when recruiting, if you are expecting your employees to be office-based 5 days a week, you are ruling out a huge proportion of the population who've got used to working from home or a hybrid working model and no longer want to work in a traditional full-time office role. So I know it's not possible for all employees, but I think if there is a appetite or an ability to make it happen, then I'd definitely suggest looking at that for your organization. So in terms of the actual recruitment process, candidate experience, now I've done it kind of as a sort of slide on its own, but ultimately this impacts absolutely everything that you do towards recruitment, onboarding, and moving people into becoming employees. This is the key thing right now. The first experience that a candidate may ever have with your business is through the hiring process. You need to make it a good one, from the first interaction through to onboarding. Organizations that attract the best candidates are the ones providing a great experience throughout the process, even to candidates who aren't successful, and I think that's really key. Communication is massive. Candidates expect prompt and frequent communication. This is considered a majorly positive factor, and with the opposite being a major turn-off and contributor to people declining roles or dropping out throughout the process. In a recent LinkedIn survey, 2/3 of candidates said that they'd expect a mobile-friendly candidate experience. So whether they're able to search or apply for jobs on their mobile phones, or whether or not they're receiving communications by text. Text messaging has a response rate that's 8 times faster than email and quicker and easier to reach applicants who may find it difficult to communicate during their working day. Talent tracking systems, or ATSs, can automate responses, including polite rejections or acknowledgements of receipt of applications, or automated replies that demonstrate the timelines for a particular recruitment of a role. And this is definitely better than a candidate receiving nothing at all. Regular touch points really keep candidates engaged in the process and make them feel valued, which is key at the moment more than ever when it's likely they're interviewing for a number of roles at any one time. Feedback is critical. The biggest complaint we receive from applicants is the lack of feedback. Taking the time to deliver prompt and constructive feedback is essential, especially if someone's invested a lot of time and attended multiple interviews. Not only is this important for the candidates, but it's important for you and for your employee brand. With Glassdoor, Indeed, LinkedIn, and a number of other social media platforms, it's very easy for frustrated job seekers to share their experiences to a wide audience quickly, which could have a huge detrimental effect to your organization and its ability to attract talent over your competitors. So in terms of then breaking it down into kind of the nuts and bolts, looking at the job description and the advert, typically the advert is going to be the first point of this whole experience. The advert and the job description need to be different things. The job description can be part of the advert, but an advert should not be a list of duties. It should be used like any other advert for any other service or product that you see on the market as a way of attracting someone or creating an interest in your organization or your role. If it doesn't grab someone's attention, then they won't apply, and all of the effort that you've put into the next steps will be wasted, as you're not attracting the candidates that you want. So things to consider on your advert. You need to think about why someone might want to apply. What are the benefits to them rather than what is the gap that you have and what you need? So all the time flipping kind of the needs that you have to the benefits for the individuals for that role. You need to make your proposition stand out from the crowd. Why work for you? What are the benefits? When I mean benefits, not just necessarily days holiday, pension, etc., which are really useful, But what are the benefits in working for your organization? What's the culture like? Why is this role interesting? What are the opportunities for development, progression? What are your unique selling points? If you're in manufacturing, what makes your product and your organization different to the factory next door to you? Then moving on, if you've got that advert and that's working well, then start looking at your job description. This should be a clear and concise document, easy to read and appealing. It needs to outline the role and also the skills and experience required for it. There's no right or wrong, but personally, I'd recommend no more than 1 page of A4, but definitely no more than 2. Nothing is more off-putting for potential candidates than a 4 or 5 page job description and 2 pages of essential requirements. So when you're writing that job description, first, it's really key to look at it. Is this relevant for this role now? Don't just roll out the job description that you had when you hired for this role 3 years ago. When you're looking at that job description and going through the essential criteria, spend some time with the relevant stakeholders and look at each one and decide, is it definitely essential, or is it something that could be trained, or something that could be maybe desirable rather than essential? The more flexible you can be, the better. The job description, again, doesn't need to be every single thing that could ever happen in that job in the next 10 years. Try and make it the relevant key bullet points, and you can always add a line in there, plus anything else that needs to be done via your line manager, any other projects that may need to be done. So I think just try and keep that concise and interesting, so that whereas in the advert and the job description work well on a website, is if you've got the advert and then a little kind of hyperlink to click here for the job description. So if you've got people's interest, they then can click through and find out more about the role. Okay, so if you've got somebody that's you've done the advert right, got the job description right, and somebody's interested and wants to go forward for an interview, great, you're well on your way. But you don't want to lose them at this stage of proceedings. Speed and communication are absolutely critical here. And by that, I don't mean that you need to rush hiring for a key role. That is absolutely not what you need to do. But you do need to move quickly to arrange interviews. Make sure that recruitment is a key priority for whoever the hiring community are in your business, and that everyone understands that this is a time-critical process. The person that's applied for your job today is interested in it today. They may not be interested in it in 2 weeks because they may have already secured another role. Suggest where you can, you need to try and respond to applicants within 48 to 72 hours of applying, and quicker even if you're able to. When booking in interviews, try and be flexible with your availability and try to offer slots within a week's time frame, especially if they're online interviews. Explain to the potential candidates how the process works, manage their expectations, and try and avoid, unless it's a very senior hire, more than 2 stages to the process. If a process is particularly long and drawn out for your average role, you're going to lose people along the way. So assuming that you get that interview booked in and the candidates arrive, whether it's virtually or whether it's face-to-face, it's really important to get the interview right. Again, an interview is obviously important for you to ascertain whether that candidate is right for you, but it's also hugely important for that individual to ascertain whether your organization and your role are right for them. A recent LinkedIn survey showed that 58% of turndowns are because of a poor interview process, people being kept waiting, a poorly constructed interview, a second interview just asking all of the same questions as the first interview. We've had instances recently of a lack of engagement, hiring managers carrying on with their work while they're talking to people, and long drawn out processes. In a world where there is a real candidate shortage, interviewing is a skill. And I think one thing that you need to really think about within your organization is whoever's doing those interviews, have they had the training that they need to interview effectively? And if not, how are you going to address this? In terms of etiquette, don't keep people waiting. If the interview's booked for 2 o'clock, try and do everything you can to be there for 2 o'clock. It needs to be a slick, engaging, and memorable process. You need the candidate to finish the interview and want to work for you and your business. It's very much a two-way process. You're being interviewed by the candidate as much as you are interviewing them. It's my view that a 2-hour grilling is not the best way to get to know someone or for them to leave with a good impression of your business. This is another opportunity for you to promote the role and why someone would want to work there. Make sure that the candidate has a chance to ask and answer any questions. I've had many occasions over the past couple of years and before where a hiring manager's called me to offer somebody a role straight after an interview, and that individual's declined instantly on the basis of the interview, where although the hiring manager felt it went well because the individual answered all their questions, they really didn't like the process of just having question after question, including trick question or good cop, bad cop fired at them. The interviewer needs to be engaging and needs to sell the business. And remember that it's very much a 50-50 around you working out whether you'd like that individual to join you and then working out whether or not they'd like to join. And then as part of the process, feedback. If an interview goes well and you like someone, don't be afraid to tell them. Tell them it's been positive. Explain to them what the next steps are and within what time frames. Ask them if they're interested. Do they have any reservations? Are there any other roles that they're interviewing for at the moment? The more information that you have at that point, the more that can inform your decision as to how quickly you might need to move, how much you might want that individual. If you think they're brilliant, but at the end of the interview they tell you they're not interested, then you may be in a really good position to kind of go over some other points. Do they need some things clarifying, or do you need to put that one down to experience and move on to the next one? Get back to people quickly with positive or negative constructive feedback. If there is a further stage to the process, ensure that you can move to that stage quickly. All right, so that's the interview process. So again, selling your opportunity, this is weaved into kind of the interview process, but also your advert and everything around it. It goes hand in hand with the candidate experience. And by selling, I don't mean that you've got to oversell, you've got to bend the truth, you've got to make out that your job doesn't have any negative points to it at all. But you really do need to focus on the positives of your organization, your role, your people. As much as possible, people are interested in the culture of the business as much as they are the role that they're going to fulfill, to try and share the culture of your business. Why do you like working there? Why do other people like working there? And if you can, try and think of ways for candidates to experience that culture rather than just hearing about it. Could some of your team be involved in the process? Could they come and meet the team for lunch, for a coffee? Could they have a tour of the building, the factory, the design lab, whatever it is that your business does? Is there an opportunity for the individual to get involved and see what the product is or what the service is? What's your website like? What's the employee experience like there? Do you have any digital content? Any videos? Have you got a day in the life of John who works in this department? Anything there that can give people a flavour of what it's like to work for your organisation will give you a little bit of an advantage. All of this obviously takes a lot of time, but it is a worthwhile investment. And if you haven't got it in place now, then you need to start thinking of getting some of these things in place as soon as you can. So assuming that you've got the candidate that you want, they've flown through the interview, you like them, they like you, then it's about getting the offer right. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get that offer right. Now, I appreciate that at the moment and at any time you've got a budget, and I'm not talking about throwing money at things, and there's often room for negotiation, but getting the offer right first time can offer a really positive message and start the engagement of your new employee off on the right note. You want someone to be engaged, flattered, feeling positive and keen to take your offer, not disappointed, surprised, or offended. If you've got a role advertised and you've got a salary advertised, make sure that during the process you were talking to the individual around their expectations. I know that not everybody can be offered at the top of a banding, and that every £1,000 or two saved on salaries all adds up. But if that role is key to your business and it's sat empty, getting the offer wrong may mean you're back to the drawing board. And what's the cost of not having somebody in post and the investment of time to go through the whole process again? Also, getting that offer right isn't always about money. You know, if somebody's told you that big thing for them is flexibility, and they've talked about that throughout the process, if you then make an offer to them that is that they've got to be in an office 8 till 6, Monday to Friday, I would say the chances are that they're not going to see that as flexible. So just think about, you know, A, what you've been advertising, B, what conversations you've had with the individual. It shouldn't be that when you're giving them an offer that it's a nasty surprise. It should be a positive reinforcement of the process that they've been through. When giving somebody an offer, make sure you include all of the elements. Anything that you would want to know about when you get an offer, is chances are so will the individual that you're offering to. So if you're not sure on the holiday entitlement or the pension contribution, then I'd suggest trying to find out before putting that offer to somebody. You know, what are the hours? What's the flexibility? More and more at the moment, what's the expectation on hybrid working? Is it number of days? Is it kind of, you know, completely remote? What is it? Is there healthcare? Is there a bonus? Is there study support? How long is your probation? All of those things are things that people want to know about. A recent good and bad example of getting the offer wrong. I had one candidate interview for a role that was paying 30 to 35k. She was on 28k, and she told the business that she was interviewing for that she was looking for 31, 32. She wanted a rise, and there was a little more travel. They listened to her. They came back to her the next day with an offer of 35, which was right at the top of their banding, because they, throughout that interview process, they thought she was at the top of what they could expect for that role. They thought her experience was great. She answered the competency-based questions brilliantly. She was a good fit, and they wanted her on board. She was over the moon. She accepted immediately. Another client we were working with, been looking to recruit for their role for a long period of time. They've got the role advertised at 38 to 45. The individual going forward for the role was earning 40, said they were looking for 42 to move. The FD came back and offered 40 and said, well, you'll have less travel, so it's effectively a pay rise. The individuals declined the role, said that they were definitely still looking for the 42. The FD wasn't particularly enamored with it, decided that they'd come back to us 48 hours and match the 42. The individual then declined the role. They said that actually the negative impact of that first offer and you deciding what my travel is worth or not has made me not want to take that role, and I don't feel it's going to be the best working relationship. So, you know, getting that right at the beginning, whether it is money, whether it's hours, whether it's flexibility, is really, really powerful. Okay, and lastly, before I hand you over to Amy, is the onboarding. So all of the above, and there's obviously quite a lot of investment of time there, is a complete waste of time if that person doesn't end up joining your business. So once you've made an offer, the candidate is accepted, there's often a 1 to 3 month period from them receiving that offer letter to starting with you. A lot can happen in that time period. If that individual is a good candidate, people from other agencies and other organizations will still be contacting them about roles. They might be finding them on LinkedIn. So it's critical that you can keep in touch with that new hire throughout that period. Ensure that the offer letter is sent out quickly and it's got all the correct information on it. And it also requests all of the information and documents that you need back from them, so that they're set up properly when they arrive. Check in with them after they've resigned, see how they're feeling. Arrange to meet with them for a drink, a lunch, a chance to meet the team, particularly if there is a longer notice period. Perhaps include them in any social activities leading up to their start. Are you able to send them their induction, their employee handbook, a welcome to the company, something beforehand? Really basic, but make sure their equipment's on order in time. I think the biggest blocker we're having with clients at the moment of getting people on board quickly is lack of laptops, lack of kind of technical and IT equipment. You know, if you know you've got somebody starting in 2 months' time, for goodness sake, make sure that you talk to your IT department and get them with what they need. If they've got any challenges during the lead up to starting, do they know who they've got to speak to? What are the plans for their first day? What are the timings? Just make sure you keep them up to date with any new company information. Is there an opportunity for them to have access to your intranet? And then just induction, basically. All of the above is about keeping people engaged and included before they start. But then on that first day, that first impression is massive. And the individual needs to be made to feel welcome and have a positive first experience. rather than feeling like they're an inconvenience. So I would say it's your role as a hiring manager or member of the HR community to make sure that that individual has got time booked in with all of the key stakeholders that they need over the first couple of weeks, so they have that real kind of positive induction to the organisation. Hopefully that's helpful. If you've got any questions, then feel free to fire them over. Otherwise, I will hand you over to Amy.
Thanks, Ben. Let me just share my screen now. So I'm going to talk a bit about retention. So I'll start off by talking about how to retain those people that have just joined your organisation. And then I will touch a bit about how to retain your existing employees as well. But I'm quite conscious that this is obviously a recruitment, it's focusing on recruitment. So I'm focusing more on the new starters. One thing, so I mean, Ben's already covered this quite a lot. So how can you make your company attractive to candidates? Now, one thing that we've noticed over the last 18 months that people's expectations seem to have shifted depending on compared to what they wanted prior to 2020, I guess. So pre-2020, it was a lot about remuneration. It was about benefits, financial benefits, particularly. Whereas now what we're kind of seeing is that people are expecting companies, or they're looking for employers that are going to look after them, that are going to put their well-being, make their well-being a priority, that are going to allow flexibility, that have got perks that aren't necessarily financial. And I think we have definitely seen that shift over the last 18 months. And it's more around kind of celebrating that and promoting those perks of working for your organisation as opposed to we offer the best salary. The other thing that's really important is values and social responsibility. I mean, 10 years ago, we used to talk about mission statements, and it's moved on now to be around core values and again, what it means to be an employee of your company. And people are looking for the employer that shares their own beliefs and their values. So they want to work for someone who they're in sync with, who they can relate to, who they can identify with. And it's really important when you're putting your job advert out there that all of this is communicated and is really obvious to the candidate. We always talk as well about linking in with the marketing department. So whoever's responsible for HR or for recruitment, link in with the marketing team, because who better to promote your organisation than the marketing team? Your external brand should mirror your employer brand, and that should be really visible throughout any job advert you do. Ben mentioned Glassdoor earlier. Glassdoor is something that, for people that don't know, it's basically a TripAdvisor for companies. And it's something that's been more and more used over the last few years. And it's something that if companies own and they use it well, it can be great for promoting your organisation, but it can also trip you up. So Glassdoor pages can be owned by the company, or they can be set up by former employees or current employees, or even just candidates that have applied for a job. If it's set up by someone else, then you don't have control over the information that's on there. If you own the page, then you can control the information, you can put pictures on there, you can put videos on there, and it's a really good then view of what it's like to work for your company. It's also a recruitment tool now as well. So companies can advertise jobs on their competitors' pages. So if you don't own your page, a competitor could advertise their jobs on your review page. If you own your page, then they can't. Now, we've spoken about Glassdoor for years and years, and it's taken quite a long time for people to really understand the importance of it. But it was only a couple of months ago that I was talking to a company, and they said they'd hired a candidate, they were really excited for them to start, they'd made the offer, they'd accepted. It was a week before they were starting, and the candidate phoned them up and said, I've just looked at your Glassdoor page, I'm sorry, I'm not going to join. And obviously it had a massive impact on them, because they then had to start from scratch, and then there was a big gap between the person leaving, who this person was covering, and then them having to restart again. But it just goes to show that people are looking at these pages now more so than ever. And also just obtaining feedback. So before you do any of this, find out from the people that are currently in your organisation why they're there. Why do they like working for you? Why are people staying in your business? And then using that to promote all of the above, basically. So one of the questions we get asked a lot as well is whether you should recruit externally or promote internally. Now, Internal promotions, they're great. They don't always work. Sometimes you do need to source someone externally, and that's absolutely fine. And the most successful companies probably do a bit of both. So whether you're going to promote internally, the first thing to do is review the internal capabilities. Do you have anyone currently in the organisation that can do this role, that can fill this role and do it really well? When you do promotions or you do offer progression, these opportunities themselves encourage retention, and that can be something as well that you talk about on the job advert. So we really promote progression in this company. We have structured career paths for people to follow. You can have a career here, essentially. And it should be an ongoing discussion. So it shouldn't be something that's just brought up once a year at their appraisals. It should be something that's ongoing, constantly talked about at every one-to-one. What's your next step? What do you want from the company? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What's your end goal? And always talking to them about where they want to be and how you can help them get there. And competencies in this are absolutely key. So if you have one role, the role that they're currently in, and you look at the competencies of that role, they're fulfilling all of those competencies. They've got them. They're doing amazing. They want to go into the next role. So what are the competencies for that role? And can they work to those competencies? And if they can't, you help them get to there, and you help them develop, and you help them work to those competencies so that when they're ready to take on that next role, they're already there. Absolutely sure that they're going to do a really good job and they're going to fly. The other thing that's really important when you're thinking about promoting internally is whether or not you have the management capability or the resources to deliver on any of the development that's needed. So if you don't have that capability or you don't have the training budget, then it's probably not necessarily the right thing to do to promote someone internally, because you might be promoting them beyond their capabilities, and then you'll be in a much trickier situation. Recruiting externally also it's great when it works. So new people, they bring fresh ideas. So if you're constantly promoting internally, you're going to always have people with the same mindset. You might not get any kind of fresh ideas. You might not have people that have wider knowledge or outside experience coming in and making your company a better place. So new people definitely do help. It also prevents people from being promoted beyond their capabilities. So if you don't have anyone, when you're looking internally, if you don't have anyone who is capable of doing that role, and you don't think it's something that they can be developed at quite quickly, then it's probably better to recruit externally. You've also got a lot more flexibility to manage issues when they're an external recruit, because when they've been there not very long, you can make commercial decisions, you can make quite quick decisions, and you can do what's needed to protect your business. If you promote someone internally and they've been with the company 5 years, and actually you've promoted them beyond their capabilities and they can't quite do the role that they have been promoted into, their previous role has already been filled. And so it poses another problem as to what do you do with this person, and it's much more difficult to manage. Ben talked about onboarding up to day one, and I'm going to talk about onboarding for the next few months after. So I have lost count how many times I've spoken to companies and I say, have you got an induction process? Do you do onboarding? And they say, yes, we've got a health and safety video that they watch. We show them the toilets, we show them where the fire point is, and they have a few meetings throughout their first week, and then we tick it off and it's done. An onboarding process shouldn't necessarily be a 1 day or a 1 week thing. It should carry on through to their probationary period, through to the end, and then beyond as well. And it's not a one size fits all. And I don't necessarily mean company to company, but within that company as well. So what onboarding process works for one role might not work for another role. So you do have to adapt it depending on what the role is that you're fulfilling. It's a two-way process. So it should be just as much for you to be giving the new employee all of this information and giving them everything they need to learn and all the training that they need. It should be just as much about them providing you with feedback on how they're feeling, on whether they're enjoying the role, if they're missing anything, if they're understanding everything that you're saying to them, if they're integrating with the team. And there should be constant communication, and it should be an open dialogue throughout the whole of that process. And you might have very structured kind of catch-up points throughout this onboarding process, and that's great, and it can be really ad hoc, but either one works. But it's just about keeping that communication open so that when they come to the end of their probationary period, if there's still some concerns or they're not quite there and you extend it, it's not going to come as a shock. Or if there's no concerns and they've been doing really, really well and they're performing in their role, again, there should be no worry about the end of their probationary period. They know they're going to pass. So it's just about keeping that communication open. The onboarding as well is really the first impressions of them of the company once they're an employee. So you need to make sure that their experience at the beginning of their employment reflects what you sold at interview. So you've sold the business really well. They're very excited to join. They can't wait to be part of this company. They join on day one. That excitement and that positivity needs to continue through that onboarding process. And all employees play a part. So everyone in the company should know what the onboarding process is, even if it's slightly different depending on the role, but everyone should play a part. The team members should know what's going to happen. They should know when they should be having catch-ups with this person, when they should be supporting this person, when they should be introducing them to other people in other departments, for example. But all employees play a part in the onboarding process, and that's probably more important now than it ever has been, because we have so much flexibility and not everyone will be in the same place at the same time all of the time. And another really beneficial thing to do is to obtain feedback from these new starters at the end of the onboarding process. So find out from them, how did it go? You know, did you get everything that you needed to? Was there anything in there that perhaps we didn't cover but would have been really helpful to cover? Was there anything in there that was a bit tedious? How did it go? And constantly review the process and keep building on it. Probably one of the hardest things to do is to be able to tell if your new employees are engaged in the business. Now, when we weren't so flexible, it used to be very visible and it probably was a bit easier. And now, because it is slightly more difficult, a lot of it comes down to communication, but actually that probably does present quite a lot of opportunities. Because before, when you was in the office all the time, you'd have your regular meetings that are set in the diary. And then apart from that, you'd probably just leave them to get on with it, apart from when there's actual structured touch points to speak to them, because they look like they're getting on with the job. They look fine. It's all good. Now that you are flexible and there is that more of that remote working, you do have to actively reach out to these people and actively seek their feedback and make sure that they're okay and engaged and happy and integrating with the team. And so I think there is definitely an opportunity now with this flexibility that to provide more of that. But there are other things as well that can help you tell. So do they input in team meetings? Do they make suggestions as to how to improve things? Do they answer questions when someone's got a question? Do they put their thoughts and ideas and opinions forward? If someone's very quiet in these meetings, it might mean, doesn't always, but it might mean that they're disengaged. Similar with social interaction, when you're talking socially with the team, are they joining in? Are they including themselves? Are they starting conversations themselves, or do they again sit quietly, or do they not join at all? That will also be quite a good indicator that they're probably not engaged. Are they asking questions? Throughout, when someone starts, absolutely no individual will come into an organization and have no questions. Everybody has questions. And if they're asking questions, that's a good sign. If they're not asking questions and they're just plowing through, that's when you might want to have a conversation with them to see if everything's okay. And are they doing what they need to as part of the onboarding process? So like I said, the onboarding process, it's two-way. So there will be responsibilities from the hiring manager or the line manager, but there will also be responsibilities for the employee. So the employee needs to be able to do the research that they should be doing, to look up what they need to be familiarizing themselves with the systems and the organization structure of the company and everything like that. Are they doing that? Are they engaging with the process? Because if they're not engaging with the process, again, probably worth having a conversation. Now, stay conversations, we've talked about this a few times over the last couple of months, and stay conversations are really, are you going to stay with the organisation? So talking to that person from the very beginning about, is this role what you expected? Do you see yourself here long term? Is this something that you can see progression with? And talking to them about what their goals are and what they want to achieve out of this role and out of the next role and within the organisation. So find out from them, are you looking to stay? Learn about what's important to them. So again, just similar to my previous point about what they want from the role, find out right from the beginning, because if they want something from the role that you can't give them, or they've got expectations that aren't necessarily accurate, then they're probably not going to stay for a long time because it won't be what they're expected. But if you have these conversations very early on, you can probably do something about it. But it is important to learn about them right from the start. And then obviously, are they performing? So are they doing what you need them to do? Are they performing to a high standard? Are they getting it? Are they understanding what is needed of them? Are they producing good quality work? All of these kind of questions will help you understand if they're engaged. Team dynamics is something that for an existing team, when we all went remote or when we all started flexibly working, for existing teams, it was fine. Everyone already knows each other, the relationships are already there, and so you've got quite a good chance that it will survive. But it's much harder for new starters to integrate these days. And I think the culture is so important. It's always been really important, but more so than ever now, it has to be really strong when you're working remotely for it to withstand such flexibility. And I think it's really important for managers to set an example. So to really encourage that relationship building and to let people know what's acceptable and what's not. And it's about communicating that very clearly from the top level. So it's okay to call someone for a social chat for 5 minutes. You don't have to only talk about work. It's about how we get back that chat at the kettle or at the water cooler or at the printer. Calling someone for 5 minutes is not going to halt productivity. It's okay. And actually, it's really important for team dynamics. And discuss it as a team. So regularly review what's working. Talk to them about it. Find out from them, is this working for you? Do you think we should do anything differently? We've been having daily calls, for example, between us at 9 a.m. every day. Is this still working? Do you still want that? We all make sure that we are in the office at least once a month together. Is that working? Do you want it more frequently? And just regularly review it to make sure that we're moving with the times and actually it is helping build these relationships and no one's getting kind of lost in the mix. The other thing that's really difficult now is cross-departmental interaction. So it's really important to actively encourage this because your team might not have much to do with other teams in the organisation on a daily basis, but prior to working remotely or prior to being flexible, they'd probably see them crossing on the stairs, they'd see them in the kitchen, they'd have a chat, and it would be very natural conversations that occur. Whereas now we have to actively encourage this and try and make sure that especially the new starters have an understanding of other departments within the company so that they understand where their role fits and how their team and other teams all fit within the company and the parts that they play. So I just thought, as I said, I'd touch on retention for existing employees as well. So obviously the easiest way to do this is to obtain feedback through staff surveys. Staff surveys may have been done to death over the last 18 months. I think lots of people have been doing staff surveys and multiple ones. But there's also other ways of doing it, like focus groups. So focus groups can often give you more information than a survey would because it gives you a right to respond. You can probe a bit more. You can talk to people about, you've mentioned this was your feedback. Can you expand on that, please? And it can still be done anonymously. So what tends to happen is a facilitator goes into a meeting room with a group of people and they will set them exercises or ask them questions, and then the facilitator leaves. And then the employees then talk about this together. And because they're talking about it together, it tends to trigger memories, it makes them think of other ideas, and you do get a lot more out of it. Then when the facilitator comes in, there's one person nominated to provide the feedback, so it's still anonymous. You still don't know who said what, and people tend to prefer that to surveys because it's a bit different to what lots of companies have been doing over the last 18 months. And then the other thing is one-to-ones. So one-to-ones is really important for line managers to do, and it doesn't have to be structured. It doesn't have to be every single month or every week. Lots of people I know do them every 6 weeks, every 2 months. Some people just do them sporadically. They just make sure that there isn't a long amount of time in between the one-to-ones. And the more often you have them and the more regularly you have them, the more natural they'll become and the more conversational they will become. And it builds that trust between the manager and the employee. And so if there are any concerns or there is anything that might make the employee start to become disengaged, it's probably going to come out at the one-to-one. The other thing you can do is review your current offering. So this might be salary benchmarking to make sure that you're competitive in the recruitment market. But but it could also be just looking at your perks and your benefits and finding out from the existing employees, these are the benefits we've always offered. Is that what you want? Do you want gym membership still? Or do you not want to go to a gym that's right around the corner from the office anymore? Would you prefer something else? And talk to them about what it is they want and see if you can enhance your offering or just change your offering and adapt it to be relevant for the current employees. Again, stay conversations, find out from them what their long-term plans are. We were working with a company a couple of years ago, and they had an employee who was an absolute star performer. He was definitely someone on their list that they could see being a future leader of the organisation. And he, out of the blue, resigned, and they had absolutely no idea why. When they spoke to him, his wife had been offered a fantastic opportunity in New York, and they were relocating. So he'd spent months planning his move to New York. He'd sourced himself a new job. What he didn't know, and had he spoken to them, is that they were actually opening in New York. And had he spoken to them and had this conversation with them, he would have been top on their list for leading the office in New York. Unfortunately, because he hadn't spoken to them about it, it was all confidential at that time. They'd already got to the stage where they'd offered someone, and so it wasn't to be. And had he had those conversations with them, I'm looking to leave, although I haven't got anything right now, it could have been, he could have secured a job with the same company in New York. So it is very alien, I think, for employees to talk to their managers about these things, but making it normal can be really beneficial. It's also important to retain the right people. So you don't want to retain those people that are not necessarily your key performers, the ones that, just do the bare minimum, get the job done, and they kind of plod along. You don't necessarily want to retain those people. And it's really important to manage issues and manage performance effectively as and when these issues arise, because it can impact the wider team. So if you've got lots of people that are coasting, that let other people do all the hard work, if you don't manage them, it's just going to upset the people that are great at what they do and the people that actually you really want to keep. And then if that happens, the people you really want to keep will leave, they'll move on, and then you're left with the people that you could potentially quite happily say goodbye to. So it's really important to manage issues and manage performance as and when it arises, so that you're retaining the right people. You can look at long-term incentives, and this can be bonuses, it can be financial, or it can be other incentives. So things like long service awards, they're not used as often as they used to be, but there are still companies that use them. Or other policies within your organisation. So things like a sick pay policy is something that quite often increases in line with length of service. Things like maternity pay tends to increase through length of service. So there are things that you can do with that. I think more than anything, it's about being self-aware as a company. You have to know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and know your competitors. So know what your competitors are offering, know how your competitors treat their employees, because they're the ones that are going to target your employees, and they're the ones that are going to target your good employees. So really know what they're doing so that you can compete with them. And the only other thing I wanted to touch here about is be wary of counter offering. So sometimes it works and sometimes it is the right thing to do. But statistics show that if you counter offer someone, they're already leaving for certain reasons. They get enticed back by the money, but they're still probably going to leave within the next 12 months. So really think carefully about counter offering, because you're probably just delaying the inevitable. It's not all the time, but it's just something to consider. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the impact that line managers can have. So I've got some stats here. So 57% of employees said that they left their manager, not their job. 73% of employees who have experienced a poor manager have considered leaving their job. And 57% of managers have never received management training. So these statistics here just really show how big of an impact a line manager can have on retention. It's really important for the line manager to adapt to their people and to adapt to the culture of the organisation. And culture is something that is constantly evolving. And it's really important for managers to have training and to really understand how to get the best out of their people and how to improve retention. I mean, being a line manager is very hard. You have to do your day job, and then you have so many things to juggle. So you have to be able to motivate your team, you have to be able to manage issues, you have to keep everyone happy, you have to look after their well-being, you have to be available, you have to be able to communicate effectively, provide feedback, positive and negative. You need to be able to do all of these different things, and it's a lot. and there's a lot to do. But if you do it badly, it can have such an impact on your retention. And I think it's really, really important that, especially now we're in this world where we are working so flexibly, that managers are trained and are managing effectively. So that's it from me on the retention. I guess my only question, Ben, is if you can see, or if you think that after, well, now furlough has ended, do you see that change in the kind of any of the recruitment trends?
It's a difficult one, to be honest. I think you know, a lot of people had wound right down on the furlough, other than in kind of the hospitality and leisure sectors. So I don't suddenly see that there's going to be an influx of people to the market, unfortunately. I think that, you know, one of the reasons for a lot of shortages of employees is that there was, you know, a real strong movement last year. Obviously, a lot of people were made redundant between potentially June and December last year. We saw a couple of key points, end of June, end of October. And so most of those people have, you know, fortunately now got themselves into new roles. Well, if those roles are going well, then typically those individuals aren't going to be looking out for new roles again. So there will be a lull. Now, I think if those roles start to not develop, or those organisations aren't delivering on their promises, then there might be a different thing. But also seasonally, there's two things. One, January is always a big boom time for individuals looking for work. I don't know whether they have the 2 weeks off at Christmas and reevaluate their lives, but also I think it largely depends. You know, certainly in the Essex marketplace, we normally attract a lot of candidates that are living in Essex and working in London because of the commute. Well, obviously that's reduced for the vast majority of people over the last 18 months, but we are, you know, from talking to people, more and more organisations do seem to be moving towards getting people in a couple of days, maybe 3 days, some even talking about 5 days. So whether or not that will then drive up the pool of candidates that suddenly don't want to do that because they've been enjoying kind of their London salary from working from their spare bedroom may make a big difference.
That's interesting. That was my only question. Thank you. So I think it was supposed to be 45 minutes to an hour. So we've done 50 minutes now. So we'll probably leave it there. If anyone has got any questions, just put in the Q&A chat, or we'll be sending around a copy of this recording anyway. And if you've got any questions, you can get in touch with us that way. But thank you all for joining.
Yeah, thanks very much.